a lot of questions for me. I thought that what I picked up from you was very beautiful. It had quite a sort of lyrical sense to it, which can work. But I do have to raise the question, again, I point back to Professor Harding, the questions of performance practice and how they can apply in a piece like this. I'm sure that you've thought about it. You probably discussed it. So I am sort of curious as to, for instance, first of all, let's start with the second one. The second one seems more problematic. I don't even notice that it's really a sonata. It doesn't seem like a typical structure of a binary form sonata, right? I don't know if you picked that up, but it has a lot of different sections and things in the second half of the piece that didn't appear at all in the first half, and it doesn't have that real sense of being a unit, but just more like an idea that follows after another. Did you get that impression? So I was thinking maybe this is like a fantasy or something. This is sort of, it has elements of improvisation and then elements of something that is more measured. And then of course that, in that middle section, that crazy thing, what is that? You know, all those arpeggiations. And this is when I was thinking exactly about the problem of performance practice, because that would have been played on a harpsichord, but in fact it probably sounds better if you can pedal it. If you couldn't pedal that, what would that sound like? I mean, try it. Just show everybody what those arpeggios would sound like if you couldn't use any pedal. Yeah, just so we all hear. Okay, so obviously that's not the way Scarlatti would play it, because he's trying, for sure, to create resonance here. So you'd be holding down as many notes as you can in the right hand. Not just the left hand, right? But the point is that probably in his mind, he's aiming for a concept, a sound idea that we can actually perform much easier on the piano. So then I think it's absolutely performance practice to actually do what he intended, essentially, even if in the real sound, he would never have heard anything like that. But then there are many other places where the problem, I think, poses a problem. Is because a lot of what Scarlatti wrote was like some composers who really, their ideas were shaped by the instrument itself. I don't remember exactly what kind of instrument Scarlatti had, whether it was a single manual or something, but for sure, it wasn't like the French harpsichords that had more body. That it was probably more like an Italian instrument and had a lot of sort of lightness and clarity. And so that's a problem for us because we have an instrument that's not anything like that. So I would have thought that in the second one, maybe you could just start it again. We'll just sort of work through that. I don't think that it would make sense to play that opening improvisatory kind of, it seems to be a kind of introductory material, right? Whether that's all sort of legato, probably not, right? And it would be very common in the Baroque age to change things up. That notes that are closer together would be more slurred, notes that are further from each other might be articulated, right? And that might add a little color to this. The character, again, this edition, I don't know, this is a photocopy of something. Is this Gilbert's edition or Kirkpatrick? What H 32121. Okay. I don't know him. But it says Allegro at the top. So probably Allegro is original. It looks like your text. It's not Longo, right? Longo, the Italian editor who added all kinds of things, and slurs and pedals and dynamics, right? So we don't have a lot of information, but we do have Allegro. And perhaps that has something to do with the character, not just the tempo, and it's in 2. Right? So these are sort of the clues that I would start with. So with that idea, even though it's improvisatory, can you try a character that has a little bit more life to it, a little bit more allegro life, you know? Okay, so I imagined somebody, you know, sort of really sort of almost crying here, the way you've done that, you know, in a very expressive, heartfelt way. Can you try to agitate that a little bit more? That it has just a little more vigor, a little more Spanish temperament or something. So we have to think about how to create that kind of temperament, how to create more agitation and activity. Articulation is one of the most important things, you know, that we can use. Not just playing louder, that's obviously it helps. And the thing about agitation is that it's abrupt, right? So, you know, even something like that opening inverted mordant, which could be, I'm not sure if it's so elegant, you know, maybe. They're on the principal note or the upper note. I heard with Scarlatti they're on principal note, but I think in the end you have to use your common sense as to what works here. Probably it works quite nice, I think, from principal note, because it's not French, right? It's not Bach. And you know, I know English Renaissance music was always from the principal note, unless they marked something specially. So this is, I believe that Scarlatti generally go from the principal note, and that they have, probably not with an Nachschlag, you know? Let's try. Maybe you have to find as many notes as you need to wake us up. That's it. I don't see why those need to be quite so, you know? You can choose and break it up. Two octaves of that. You're following a pattern. Right? What does G mean? Absolutely not G. This is where we introduce some sort of sense of we have to think, is the character, you know, is it sort of outlining a chord or is it more rhythmic? To me, that's allegro, you know, and I'd like you to just check something here in the last bit here where you have this. Can you play that again? So let's just take an idea of the tempo from that and see if we can relate that to the main tempo of the measured. And it almost sounds like a little bird. You know, it has little, you know, it has that angularity to it. It's, I'm not saying it's a bird, but that's what came to my mind. It could have been a little, if it was a cuckoo, it'd go the other way around. Right? I can't remember how they go. But I think that will give us something more character that is suitable to this. Yeah. And certainly with scales, you don't, I think they have a propelling quality. They're rising scales of right? Especially the right hand, because the right hand is answering the left hand, right? So it's a kind of reiteration of that with a brighter color of sound, right? A lot of these things also, it's very wise to sort of think about, this is Baroque music, but it's late Baroque, right? So we sort of on the cusp, you know. But some of the ideas, obviously, of figures are important. So when you see a rising figure like that, there's a Latin term for that, a rhetorical device that's being used there. And I don't remember what it's called, like ascentium or something. You know, it's going up. And it has an energy, just like going down has a certain energy too. And they're figures which people would recognize very easily. And so if you were interpreting or looking at a score like this, you knew how to read it, because you knew the figure. It was a pattern that was all throughout Europe, right? So that's why I think this has energy. It's not quite so, it's not so tempered in a way, right? It has more temperament. Let's try it again. This is the problem with music from this time, is that rarely do you find slurs that you have to think. How is it grouped? Is it the... And I see this... Is a pattern. And so I could sort of guess that the octave is maybe... It could be... You know, sort of like as one note, T, yum, bum, ba, yum, bum, ba, yum, bum, ba. Yeah, if you want to also give that an allegro quality, think about the fact you have long notes, T, there's an agitation in those figures, right? Unless you think of it as something that's more calm. Yes. But I think in this, probably to sort of give us some sense of a consequential quality to what we've had up to now. Yeah? The lens of the 19th century, you know? And it can be very beautiful. You know, I'm sure that if Mendelssohn saw this, he probably would have played it more like Mendelssohn. But, you know, the question is how can we make it work in a way that does some sort of justice, some sort of gives respect to our knowledge of the past, people who spend their whole lives trying to figure out performance practice. And then we have to sort of take that information and change it into real sound in a way that actually works for an audience today. That's the problem for performers, you know. But we have to at least try to be as faithful as we can to what we know. Yes. Right? So that's why I think that maybe this little walking bass. Sure, on the harpsichord you couldn't have little ups and downs, but you could articulate. Some notes would connect, some would not, right? That's you know, I think that's a little more, it has a bit of a bounce now. And that, again, it all adds up when you put it together as one piece that is made up of different sections, but they all get united somehow. The first one, again, I don't know if this mark is Scarlatti's, Andante Comodo. It seems suspicious to me. And you don't have it. And you see, I'm afraid that that's probably an editor who's decided that he likes, or she likes it, Andante Comodo. That Andante Comodo, I've never seen that in, you know, in any of the Baroque composers. You don't usually find anything written. So you would usually just look at the figures themselves to give you a clue. And the fact that you see a lot of to me, there's also a sense of this having a little bit more articulation. Think about the key of E major. What is the key of E major? Do you know anything about E major? As a key, if you're a Baroque composer and you're thinking, I want to write a piece that has a certain character, and I'm going to choose E major because that is suitable to that character. What do we know about E major? I don't know, I'm just asking.
You mean the pieces?
Huh?
You mean the pieces?
The key. You know, there was this, for sure, composers chose their keys wisely. And it's something Professor Harding talked about, C minor, right? F major, we did the F major sonata, which had that lovely singing quality. There's something rather comical about that. E major, there was a composer, musicologist of the late 18th century named Schubert. Nothing to do with Schubert. Schubert. I can't remember his first name. And he went through all the keys and sort of assigned characters to them based upon what had already been composed. And E major, if I remember right, was a rather jolly key. It was quite bright, and we can sort of hear that brightness. I hear it, you know? And it has a certain, a point to the sound, and it's celebratory, I think. And the fact that you've got horns, which are sort of instruments of celebration as well, or some sort of ceremonial or something, you know, maybe we can approach this a little differently. If he wanted something really calm, then I don't know why he'd be putting I don't calm so much by that. I think it has those fits that, I don't know, try it. Maybe, yeah. Let's take it a step further with the articulation. What about not playing legato? But what about shorter little groups. So then we can start to interpret as well and say, is this like a little fanfare at the beginning? You know, does it have a certain sense of its own time? And then we start sort of, then we start a new section in a way. It's sort of the main body. Yeah, if you have a descending line, if you were a harpsichordist, how would you make it a diminuendo? It's a trick question. You can't make a diminuendo on a harpsichord, yeah. But they tried by holding notes. So you can hold more overlapping notes to create more resonance, and not holding so much towards the bottom. On the piano, it's much easier because we can do diminuendo, but it's also very nice to sort of lighten up the articulation. So we feel that there's one beat in the measure. Sound of guitars and lutes and all that stuff, that you can occasionally arpeggiate some of those chords. You know, not all of them, but some of them really seem to be suitable. Like it gives it a little bit of a dog barking kind of, you know, a little bit of a. I think that's a nice sort of color to that you can add to it that makes sense. Because there were some places where you had some arpeggiations here. What is it? And they got very kind of static. And I just wondered if some of them could have a feeling of stronger. You can arpeggiate the ones that have more length, like an agogic. It's ways of showing, because in Baroque music, we had to always kind of show, we had to, I wasn't there, but the idea of strong and weak, of the good notes and the bad notes, of the, you know, no matter where you were in Europe, there was that sense of the showing us the principle of magnets, you know, of the pulse, the places that sort of became central, and the other beats that surrounded it, either as afterbeats or as upbeats, right? Yeah. So, okay, all right, well, we didn't get to the horns, really, but, yeah, so just remember some of these things. That really, you don't need to resort to so much pedal.
Yes.
All this stuff, figures like that, where you have duples, there's no reason to sort of try to soften them and make them, but actually show them. It's sort of talking, you know? And it adds a little bit of life to the music that I think really would help this. Okay?
Yes.
All right, so there we go.